Well, good Wednesday evening, College Church. It's good to be with you this Wednesday night as well. I hope you've had a great day today, and I hope this video finds you doing well tonight. The title of my devotional tonight is Keep the Faith, Hold On to Hope, but Be Real. During the Vietnam War, Admiral Jim Stockdale was held prisoner for 8 years in a prison war camp. He was tortured over 20 times during his 8 years, and he was tortured in order to receive vital information that would help the Vietnamese win the war. Jim Stockdale never broke. He was living, his life, was a living and daily torment. It was an awful way to go, he would recount many years later. But he would say he never gave up hope. He kept the faith, but he faced every day's realities the same way. He was real about what was going on day in and day out. It was Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, that he calls this the Stockdale paradox. Never giving up hope, but accepting reality or the reality of your current situation. Stockdale would go on to say that it is different. The way he approached his time in the prison camp was different than being the optimist. The eternal optimist would look for the good in every situation. He would say, we're going to be out by Christmas. And when Christmas came and they weren't out, he was devastated. Or we're going to be out by Easter. And when Easter came and he wasn't out, he was devastated. And the optimist ended up, as Stockdale would say, ended up dying in that prison camp of a broken heart. Stockdale said that they never had a chance to make it out alive because they never faced their current reality. Because Admiral Stockdale held on to hope and kept his faith, but at the same time, facing the current reality, he survived. And he would later call it the period of his life that meant the most to him. Can you imagine saying that about being locked up as a prisoner of war for 8 years and being tortured day in and day out? But that's the period of his life that meant the most to him. Well, in Philippians chapter 1, verse 12 and following, the Apostle Paul is in, as he describes it, in chains for Christ. Paul, as we know, has suffered. He has been beaten. He has been locked up. He has been tortured and tormented for the advancement of the good news of Jesus Christ. And now he is in prison. But during this entire time, we see and we hear and read the writings of Paul. Paul has kept his faith. He has held on to hope. But he was always real about the current situation that he faced. Let's pick up in Philippians chapter 1, starting in the second half of verse 18 all the way through 21. I'll read that for us. Paul says, "Yes, and I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help given by the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or death." And here's that famous line in verse 21. "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." That last line, "for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain," I would like to call the Paul paradox, much like the Stockdale paradox. And there's two things that I want to point out tonight that I think will apply to us in our lives as well that go along with these two paradoxes. The first one in the paradox, Paul's paradox, as I've called it, is that Paul knew his purpose. The Apostle Paul knew his purpose. He knew that he was destined and that his job was to be a messenger of Jesus Christ to lost people. And he longed to fulfill that purpose. And he did it day in and day out. And we see that in his writings. And so fulfilling that purpose, he had no reservations, he had no fear, and he was not ashamed of the things that he had to face. In those situations, he kept the faith and he held on to hope, but he knew his purpose so well that he could do it without any fear or trepidation. And he was also able to focus in on the current reality because he was fulfilling that purpose. The second thing I think we can see from the Paul paradox is that Paul was good to go. And when I say go, I mean he was good to die. He was ready to die. He was real about what might happen to him and what eventually did happen to him because he preached the good news of Jesus. He was real that he would face death, that he would face being arrested and beaten and tortured because he was preaching the good news. He wasn't disillusioned about it. He knew what he was getting himself into and what he was faced with. But in his hope that he always maintained was not his ability in the current situation. It was in God's message. The hope that he maintained was not in his ability. It was not in what he was able to do, or it was not in the current situation. It was in the message and the truth of God's word that he carried. That's the Paul paradox. Being willing to do whatever it takes because we know our purpose, and he knew his purpose. Being willing to do whatever it takes to share the message of Christ. To live is Christ. But God, if it's time for me to go, it's a gain. I will be with you forever. Well, let's think just for a minute about you and me and this Paul paradox. Do you know your purpose here on this earth? Some of you may say, absolutely, I know my purpose. And you could list off the thing that you think you're here for. Are you confident in that purpose? Some of us may be, and some of us still may be looking. Well, could I challenge you tonight to search God's word for your true purpose? Could I challenge you to do that? And might I make a suggestion? If we really found our true purpose, our reason for living, could it not be the same as Paul's? To be a messenger of Jesus Christ and to seek and to help him and to help bring the lost to God? Could that not be our main purpose? Well, the second thing is, are you good to go? When the Paul paradox is read and we think about it, and then we apply that to our life, can we really say for us to live is Christ and then to die is gain? Are you good to go? Are you good to die? Are you ready to die? Paul was. Don't we all want to be at the point Paul was in Philippians chapter 1, verse 21? To die is gain. That's a journey that I'm striving daily to be on. Although I admit many days it's a struggle, I'm striving to be on it. And I just want to encourage you to join me in this endeavor. The Stockdale paradox. Keep the faith, hold on to hope, and be real about your current situation or what's right in front of you. If you really stop and think, I think that is a really good approach to handling life. It's a really good approach. We're able to handle what's right in front of us. We're real about it. But at the same time, we know it's our faith and our hope that carries us through. The Paul paradox. Living means to live for Christ. Dying means to live with Jesus forever. That's the Paul paradox. And as much as the Stockdale paradox is a good approach to life and how to handle life's situation, I think that we can all agree that the Paul paradox is a godly approach with eternity in mind. And tonight, I just want to encourage you to search the scriptures to find your purpose like Paul did, and then to really continue to develop that faith and hope in God so that we can be good to go when it's our time. But to live is Christ, and to die is gain. The Paul paradox. And I would contend, and I'm sure you would agree, it is a godly approach with eternity in mind. It can help set our days. It can help make our toughest days easier to navigate because we have eternity in mind. I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope it's challenged you and perhaps maybe even encouraged you in some way tonight. Much love to you, and thank you for joining in. We'll see you soon.